Are you ready to take your first steps towards financial freedom by investing in property? Whether you're a first-time investor or you started your portfolio but need some help continuing to grow, 2022 REB Buyer's Agent of the Year and Rising Star finalist Lachlan Vidler and his team at Atlas Property Group are here to help. As experts in property investment, Lachlan and his team are ready to help you take your next step in growing your portfolio. By completing the research, sourcing and negotiations, Lachlan goes the extra mile to find you a high-performing investment property. Visit atlaspropertygroup.com.au to book in your discovery call absolutely free of charge.
This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
G'day, how you going? Phil Tarrant here, host of the Smart Property Investment Show. Hope you're well, hope you're dry. I think this rain deluge that's hit the East Coast is now behind us, but that doesn't mitigate the huge impact that we've had here on the East Coast from the sort of Queensland border, southeast Queensland, all the way down south through New South Wales. The cleanup continues. There's a lot of Aussies out there doing it tough right now. Our thoughts are with you. Anything you can do to help those Australians in need right now, I'm sure to be widely appreciated. There's got a lot of people thinking about property investment strategies moving forward and, the imperative of buying the right property in the right areas, because there is investors that do have flood affected properties. And I'll be going through the journey now of working with their insurers to work out what's going on. We'll do a bit of a full podcast on that at a point in time. Today, I really wanted to get into, there's a lot of info out there right now. There's a lot of scuttlebutt, there's a lot of discussion around what's going to be happening with interest rates. And that's not the key thrust of today. If you want to keep informed and all that, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au, we're writing about it every single day to help you get some sense for what may happen to the official cash rate moving forward, and therefore what may happen to your interest rates moving forward, and the sort of steps you can take to mitigate any impact around that, but also realize some opportunities in it. But it's just a sage reminder that property investment is very much a game of finance. And myself, my journey investing in property over many years through SPI, Smart Property Investment, finance has been the catalyst and the keystone for us not only building out a good portfolio, but potentially us not building the portfolio we really could have built if we sort of take a greater focus on being proactive with always being finance ready. And finance ready means that you got all your stuff sorted out, so you can get a loan or you can refinance a loan so you can use that money for doing other things. So it's just a real reminder, all this interest rate talk, about the very important role of the mortgage broker. And, I'm going to be banging the drum here because I've always done it. Mortgage brokers now are writing over 60% of all mortgages in Australia. So more Australians go to a mortgage broker to get a home loan or an investment property or whatever sort of finance they do with a bank. You're only seeing, and no doubt you've seen it yourself, banks closing all over Australia as everyone sort of leverages the digital connectivity that we have now. So banks are closing, and I only think that mortgage broker growth is going to continue up towards 80% into the future. So brokers are doing a good job. I believe in mortgage brokers. I believe in them so much that I actually invested in a mortgage broker last year, because they are absolutely critical to supporting property investors, and they're now doing my finance. And we'll have a big sort of a series of articles and also podcasts coming up as I go through the process of refinancing the Smart Property Investment Show using the team over at Finny Mortgages, finny.com.au. So hold on, lock in. I think you'll enjoy that. It'll be a good journey for all of you to sort of understand the who, what, where, how of how we're going to refinance that portfolio and what we are going to do with the money, the capital that we extract out of it. We're not refinancing everything up to 80%. We've been very strategic about withdrawing or pulling some money out of it so we can deploy it elsewhere. But a lot of the other stuff is going to be just resetting 5-year interest-only rates at a much sharper rate to bring the portfolio back to a neutral position. So we're going to start that series of podcasts over the next week or so. So I hope you do enjoy it. But I've actually got one of the Finny brokers into the studio today, and it's sort of connected in with what we're doing with the sort of refinance, the recalibration of the finance on the Smart Property Investment Show. Rebecca Carlson, she's a broker there, but I wanted to pick her brain and give you some sense for this, because you might not be there yet, but you may be in the future. I know most property investors want more. Just some of the nuances of doing or securing finance in a more sophisticated or a larger portfolio. So once you start getting beyond sort of 3, 4, 5 home loans, getting finance just starts getting a little bit harder. It's not impossible, but it starts getting a little bit harder. So I want to understand some of those dynamics from Rebecca and what really works well and how you can work with your broker more effectively if you do have those larger portfolios that you are seeking finance. Rebecca, how you going? You well?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Quite a long-winded conversation. I do apologise. The point being, not all investors are buying their first or second investment property. And you must admit, as a mortgage broker, Rebecca, it's much easier to do those home loans than those with larger portfolios, which we'll chat about today. For yourself, Rebecca, you've been a broker for a little while?
Yeah. So I've been in finance for about 15 years and I've been lending for pretty much the exact same amount of time. Started off in the retail space with one of our retail lenders, but moved into mortgage broking as a specialty.
And like I'm die-hard sort of broker fan, obviously, and I'll talk about all that's great about mortgage brokers. And I only think back to the work we did as a corporate during that period of time, the Royal Commission, when they were trying to remove mortgage brokers or make it impossible to use them. So I'm going to beat the drum for mortgage brokers. Do you enjoy being a broker? You get a lot of satisfaction out of it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I have chosen my profession well. It's something that I enjoy, so it makes work easy.
And how do you see the broker sort of profession growing in the future? Yes, the number of brokers I think will grow and how they help Australians get mortgages. What do you think is going to be the sort of broker of the future? What sort of work are they doing?
I think that there's going to be different categories of brokers, to be honest, just for the different audiences. So I think there are still going to be brokers that are going to be predominantly looking at owner-occupied purchases and helping the first home buyer markets. I think that we are definitely needing a different space for investors, also a different space for commercial. I think that people's different expertise can't wholly and solely cover all areas.
And I would argue that the broker that supports property investors is probably a different caliber to owner-occupiers, particularly those brokers that help property investors who have significant portfolios, which you fall into that realm. Did you like doing the big client assessments, the big client sort of refinancing? I know it can be a headache. I'm one of those people. To do my mortgage, I always apologise to my broker because it's pretty hard going, but no doubt it's pretty intriguing and interesting work for you.
Yeah, look, it definitely is more complicated than the standard lending, but working with clients, I end up having quite a relationship with them. We end up sharing spreadsheets and going backwards and forwards over the information. So there is a lot of in-depth communication about the portfolio. So it's not just about the numbers.
Yeah, you must sort of get into the head of the investor, them sort of understanding where they're going, what their goal setting is. And, you still do mortgages for, my first investment property versus that person who might have 20 investment properties. Did you have a preference for the sort of work that you like to do?
Oh, look, I really enjoy having the mix. So I find the larger portfolio is quite a challenge, but it is good. I really like to test myself. So getting the solution at the end for clients that are trying to think it's impossible to get to their 10th investment property and then finding them an option, that's quite a lot of self-satisfying.
Yeah, and the best brokers I know get a real kick out of getting results for their clients. And I want us to get into some of the sort of specifics of working with clients with large property portfolios. We'll just go to a break beforehand. Stay with us. Back in a moment. Welcome back, everyone. It's Phil Tarrant here, host of the Smart Property Investment Show. I'm with Rebecca Carlson. She's a broker for Finny Mortgages, finny.com.au. It's a business that supports property investors. Rebecca, Beck or Rebecca?
Oh, Beck's fine.
Beck's fine. I felt I went, Beck, I just want to get that right. When you sort of have an opportunity to work with a property investor with a large portfolio, what's the initial steps for you to get an understanding of whether or not you can help, whether the client actually has capacity for more borrowing? What's the sort of first steps for you? Ben, what I want to get to is so our listeners who actually have these large portfolios can best have a relationship with the mortgage broker. What's the first stuff that happens?
Yeah, so the first thing I do with a client that has a large portfolio is really get an understanding of the current situation. So properties that they hold, rentals, loans, current structure, And then I really want to have a chat with them about how they want it to be. I look at things like uncrossing securities just to work within plans of building future investments, extracting equity, things like that.
And you must see property investors from all walks of life. And by that, I mean their sophistication in administration, their sort of sensitivities towards the process and how they go about securing finance, their level of involvement and engagement. You've probably seen it all. How bad are some investors' sort of admin? No doubt the first step is just send me over everything you've got. They should, most property investors with large portfolio, think about myself, should just go, here you go, here's everything spelled out. It's perfect. It's going to tell you how it is. Is that how most people operate?
Look, I do find I'm pleasantly surprised a lot of people do have their admin under control, so they can hand that information over to me quite easily. I do find the odd one that has just gotten so busy with building the portfolio that they haven't been able to maintain it. So there is sometimes a bit of a lag there.
It's easier for you to do your job if people are organised and have their admin in order?
Oh, 100%. And it's easier for me to give them better options. So if I've got half the information and then I need to come back and ask too many questions, and I might miss something essentially.
So no doubt the impact of that is the process is slower. You may not be able to identify the right or the appropriate financer for them. And there's that layer of frustration around it as well, because things don't happen as smoothly as possible. So, as an investor with a large property portfolio, get your stuff sorted out before you even start speaking to a mortgage broker, because you'll probably move closer to the outcome you want faster. What's the sort of biggest portfolio you've seen, Rebecca? What sort of numbers, like in terms of size, that number of properties and stuff?
Yeah, so look, I see a few around the sort of 8 mark. I was dealing with a client that we built up to 12. That's probably my largest on record at the moment.
Yeah, and that's a lot of properties, right? I think there's only a fraction of Australians have more than 6 investment properties. You wouldn't even be able to fill a small sort of football stadium with the amount of people who are there. So once you start getting to sort of 5, 6 properties, it gets complicated. When do you think, what's the sort of inflection point for complexity with lending when it comes to the size of your portfolio? It's once you sort of beyond 2 or 3 properties is when we start getting $1 million in debt with a particular lender, that they start getting a bit sort of jittery and it changes the rules or the game?
Yeah, look, that's probably a fair benchmark. It really does depend on the lender. So we have lenders that are particularly concerned about things like debt to income ratio, also have more conservative sensitivity buffers. So the larger the portfolio, obviously that's going to complicate things more for particular clients. But yeah, between 3 and 4, then it becomes the next sort of bandwidth.
And that's where you need to start thinking about diversifying the lenders or opening up to other lenders. And to be fair, you probably don't want too much debt with one particular lender. It's a really good, way to build your portfolio up by diversifying those type of things. And the question for you, Rebecca, is what are most property investors with large portfolios that you're working with right now, what are their key objectives? I mentioned mine at the moment. I'm going through this portfolio review and I'm using the team over at Finney, is to recalibrate some of my interest rates so I can get a better cash position. So rather than paying I pay principal and interest on most of the properties inside the Smart Property Investment portfolio, which is about 17 properties. I want to get that back to get it down to neutral, and I'm going to extract some equity. Are you seeing that a lot of investors at the moment are going down that equity extracting strategy? Is that becoming more prevalent?
Yeah, definitely. Everyone, especially with the growth that a lot of the property markets had, they're trying to jump on pulling out as much equity as possible to move on the next purchase. I do find a lot of them are also in the case where they bought the property 5 years ago and their interest-only periods are coming up, and they want to look at extending those also to keep things as neutral as possible. So very similar situation as yourself.
Yeah, it's pretty common. Hence the reason why I share the sort of Smart Property Investment portfolio with people, because what we're doing is largely consistent with what other investors are doing. And I want to get into some of that sort of tactical stuff around finance. We're just going to another break. Stay with us. Back in a moment. Welcome back, everyone. It's Phil Tarrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show. I'm with Beck Carlson, broker at Finney Mortgages, finney.com.au. Now, we spoke about resetting of 5-year interest only rates, and that's what we're doing at the moment. Is that sort of easier business for brokers to transact? If they're not trying to up the debt, they're just trying to reset the debt. Way back in the day, you just had to get on the phone once upon a time and just go, hey, I want to continue my interest only. Can you just reset it? And it was just a phone call. Now you got to do a full mortgage application. Is that difficult to get through, or is it largely if you've got your stuff sorted out, you can get it done?
Yeah, look, as long as you've got your stuff sorted out, in most cases, it is quite easy to get done. It really depends on whether your circumstances have changed over the last 5 years. So whether you've added additional liabilities, children, things like that that can affect your borrowing capacity, because the banks obviously look at it again.
And do you find if you want to reset your 5-year interest only rates, you get a better result in terms of getting the rate changed and getting a sharper rate by changing lenders? Do lenders typically want to try and keep that business, and can you negotiate with them at that point in time when you're resetting your 5-year interest only?
You can certainly renegotiate with your existing lenders. There are some really competitive deals on the market at the moment. So I am finding a lot of clients are refinancing, taking advantage of the sharper rates with different lenders and cashback offers. It seems to all tie into one and give a really good result.
And what are you seeing? People mainly go and sort of fixed or variable rate products at the moment?
Look, I think a lot of clients at the moment are moving towards variable products. The movements with the banks with the fixed rates have put them so far ahead of the variable rates that it's not cost effective currently without bringing into account projections for interest rate hikes to do anything but variable.
And you must see this as well, and this is a tactic we'll be deploying as we refinance the Smart Property Investment Portfolio, because we will extract some equity out of it. You don't need to blow that dough straight away. One of the great things about variable rate products and certain types of variable rate products, the sort of no frill stuff, you don't normally get to do this, but on the sort of fully featured type loans, you can have offsets set against the mortgages or the variable parts of your mortgage if they're split, and you can offset the loan with cash that you're holding, waiting for a rainy day to deploy in another property purchase. You must be seeing that. That's what we're going to do inside the Smart Property Investment Portfolio, Beck, is to refinance, but just keep that money parked in offsets. Can you give me some sense for how sort of popular that tactic is for property investors?
Look, I am seeing it more and more. So I've got clients that are doing it for particular reasons, looking at the next property investment, also some looking at diversifying portfolios and moving cash into things like commercial purchases. So it depends on the person, but definitely the holding in the offset, having the funds available, giving them choices is something that I'm seeing a lot of.
Yeah, and it's essentially keeping your money liquid. You can, whether it's in a redraw or an offset, look, you don't know the difference of those things, go to smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. We've written a lot about it over time. It means you can deploy that money. You've got that money. You can pull it out pretty quickly and use it for how you want to. A lot of the times, though, Beck, lenders will ask you, what are you doing with the money that you're refinancing with? You typically need a good reason for it. Sometimes they don't like, because I'm just going to put in my offset and pay less interest. They want to know that you're probably going to deploy it to another purchase of some description or a renovation. Do you get that question a lot?
Yeah, so look, we do need to, with some lenders, we need to evidence where funds are going. With others, we just need to have a reasonable request of why we're borrowing the extra funds. In most cases, it really depends on the amount of equity that you're pulling out. So if, for example, you've got $1 million house and you're trying to pull out $800,000 in cash, there are going to be more questions than if you're topping up an existing investment and pulling out $100,000. So as long as there's a designated purpose for the funds, that seems to be acceptable to most lenders.
Yeah, I'm conscious also is that we're going through probably some, if you're new to investing, some pretty sophisticated concepts around lending. And this comes to the point that get yourself a good mortgage broker and work with them so you can, all these little bits around the edges can really make your portfolio go from being negative to positive or being something which is, average to being absolutely exceptional. And I see now there is some new to market investors who are moving into fixed rate products now. This whole discussion around a fixed versus variable interest rate, both have their merits. We've spoken about some of those around variable, means you can offset the loans if you have those sort of facility, or redraw it out, which means you're either paying less interest or you're putting more of that money to the principal component to pay your mortgage off faster. These are all the type of questions you need to be asking your mortgage broker. On the fixed rate side, the certainty around repayments is one of its benefits. However, you're pretty restricted. If you want to sell the property, you got to break the mortgage. It's going to cost you money. If you want to renovate or refinance the property, you've got to pay a break fee. So there's a lot of these type of things that you need to be working through as you set your portfolio with your mortgage broker. When you're new to investing, you got time on your side. When you start getting a larger portfolio, which is what we're talking about, all this stuff becomes really, really clear. Beck, in terms of lender diversification, what's your recommendations on that for investors to get that right? How much is too much with one particular lender?
I think that's, I don't really have a definitive answer on that, but I do find some lenders have their own thresholds. So I have some lenders that don't want to go above $2-3 million lending with a particular client. That's just the capacity. So to be honest, I think keeping more than 2 properties with one lender is acceptable, and then moving on to the next is probably not a bad option.
Have you got any sort of interesting scenarios you're working through right now you can share with us?
Sure. I've actually got an existing investor at the moment. He's got 3 properties. He's been dealing with another lender, mortgage broker. It has gotten to the point where he's been told he can't borrow any extra funds based on debt to income ratio and borrowing capacities. We've looked at things from a different point of view, and we've come up with some options that could expand his portfolio, probably slightly. It's only going to get into the next purchase, but at least it's going to be something. But as part of the process, all of his properties were cross-securitized, and equity releases were done against different properties for different purposes. So it's been a bit of an untangled and streamlined process for this client at the moment.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that sort of stuff, and this goes to the point where people have set their portfolio up the wrong way, or they've got the wrong advice. So you talk about their cross-securitizing, which, has some merit to a particular strategy. Most investors I know try and avoid that like the plague, to keep everything sort of siloed and individual. But that's good hygiene. Do you get a lot of satisfaction personally out of fixing other brokers, or maybe not other brokers' mess, but direct to bank mess? Because if you go to a bank and you're a property investor, they're probably going to want to try and start cross-securitizing your stuff. Banks have a habit of doing that. You must get satisfaction out of fixing that for investors. Yeah,
look, it just gives them options. So I know if they've got everything uncrossed, that they can, if they want to buy another property, that we can pull on one for equity, or if they want to sell one down the track, that we're not going to have this massive headache. So I know that it's the right solution for them in the end. So, yeah.
That's really interesting, Beck. Look, thanks for your time today. I've really enjoyed the chat. I always love chatting about mortgages. Sometimes when you're finance ready and you're ready to go, mortgages are the greatest thing in the world. When you're going through the process of getting finance ready, I must admit, it can be quite a trying time, especially if you've got a large sort of property portfolio with a lot of moving parts. And it's definitely the Smart Property Investment Portfolio, which we've actually started the process to do a finance assessment on it with you to refinance a lot of it. We're going to get stuck into that, and I'll share that journey. I've got my accountant about to come on to have a chat with us about how we're going to go about doing it, the type of properties that we're going to be looking to extract equity from, and those other properties which we're just going to try and look to reset the interest-only period on. So lots of that coming ahead. Bit of a teaser and a taster there for you, sort of looking at doing finance for property investors with larger portfolios. What I'm seeing in the market right now is that investors are getting ready. Most property investors, I'd like to think all property investors have had pretty good growth over 2021 in their portfolios, and they're all looking to work out how they can deploy that growth, how they can supercharge the ongoing growth of their portfolio through capitalizing on that. And where that starts, often for most of them, is that whole refinance play. They might not necessarily use the money straight away, but they're getting liquid. So if property markets do shift in the gear and everyone's talking about flattening the market and some maybe negative growth in the market moving forward, that's when you're going to see property investors capitalize on it. So get yourself set, get yourself ready, go and speak to a mortgage broker, get your finance sorted out, get your pre-approvals in place, and if appropriate for you, get those refinances done and have that money ready to deploy. Because when you can move fast, when you can negotiate with confidence, when real estate agents and vendors know that you're a serious punter who is ready to buy and can buy, is when you typically make the best buying decisions. Rebecca Carlson from Finny Mortgages, finny.com.au. Really enjoy the chat. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Phil. It was really nice. Thank you.
Nice one. Remember to check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au if you like social media. Smart Property HQ is where you'll find us, so you can make sure you're informed with what is absolutely latest stuff happening in property, so you can make more informed decisions. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Looking to secure finance to maximize your returns on your investment property? Finny can help. With access to over 70 lenders, Finny can find the right finance for your unique situation. So whether you're ready to refinance for a better rate, improve your cash flow, release equity to grow your portfolio, or are looking to find the right finance for your next purchase, we're here to help. Visit finny.com.au today to learn more.